this lit now.
Yes.
So when it's time to light the candles, this is the light this, and then do the jail. So this is the one we use to light the others. Yeah, that works with. That looks like a complicated candle. Lots of wicks or something. So I see there are three. I saw all the horizontal ones. Anyway, that would be the way
Okay.
to do
All
it.
right, sounds good. And I might forget to do this one. So where can I put this? Right here?
How will it fit your purposes? Or when are you going to light it?
When I start this one.
Which is during the sermon part of it, so it's after we've done it.
So I don't want to interfere with that.
That's
I'll
right.
bring it up.
Or else you could leave it back. You could put it here, and then you could move it when you come up if you wanted in front. I would just suggest not starting with it in front of the
I don't want
others.
to.
So that you could leave it anywhere up here, and you could shift it. That'd be fine. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
I think I'll take it. Okay. So that,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay.
Yeah, it's not. It's pretty casual. So
You
that's,
know, my biggest thing is really, it's not the words, it's not the language, it's
that step. Oh yeah, I've been here. I've been here a few years anyway, but yeah.
I felt like
used to
later
it.
when I
Really?
so that kind of shifted.
It'll probably help you remember.
Yeah. All right. We don't have gathering music today to cue us because unfortunately Justin is not with us. So we're just going to ask you to come take your seats, please, and we'll start in 1 minute. No hats in church, please. He didn't hear me. I said no hats in church. Welcome to the First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts. My name is Jessica Brown, and I'm delighted to be your worship associate on this beautiful summer morning. Thank you for coming in to join us. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We come together at FRS online and in person, committed to love, peace, and justice. Our mission and our invitation to all of you is to come as you are. Journey together in love, act with courage, and transform our world. If you're worshiping online this morning and would like to access this morning's order of service, please click on the link just below the live stream window. And please be sure to join us next week, July 30th. That will be our last July service, and it will feature a gong meditation like we had on New Year's Day with Zach Field. And if you've never experienced one of the gong meditations, you're in for a treat if you can come join us on the 30th. And after that, we're going to have a pie social to celebrate summer. So please note that that will be the last service in the summer series. There'll be no summer services in August to give the staff a well-deserved break. And maybe one more comment to say, unfortunately, Justin is not able to join us today to offer music. So we will be doing things a cappella. He is recovering. He's doing well, but he has been ill. So we won't have Justin today. Thank you. It's good to be together.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, welcome. I'm Reverend Jane Toohey. I am an affiliate minister of this church, and it's my privilege to be standing in the month of July for our summer services for Reverend Rebecca Bryant, who is on a very, very well-deserved break and summer vacation and study break. As Jessica said, this is the third in a series of 4 services this July, in which we've been focusing on different forms of art as portals to the soul. We've been calling this Languages of the Soul and looking at images from poetry, photography, today storytelling, next week gong music, silent in silence, as ways of turning inward and listening to our own heart's messages. And today we're focusing on storytelling, and it is my real pleasure to welcome the Reverend Janet Dunn, who is a dear friend, classmate from seminary. She comes to us from the mountains of Vermont, and she has been a master storyteller for a long time, but she combines those skills and talents with her other lives as an artist and as a forest guide, and is a certified forest, what's the term that you use? Forest therapy guide. So she's a woman of many talents, and I'm going to let her stories and Janet speak for themselves. And this morning, we're going to begin, instead of our usual call to worship, with a very short gathering story. For those of you who know me, brevity is not one of my skills. So I was challenged by Justin and by Jessica to come up with a short gathering story. Here it is. So, at 6:30 in the morning of March 12th, in the year of 1930, a small brown man led a trained cadre of 78 followers from his ashram in Sabarmati, India, on a march of more than 200 miles to the ocean. 3 weeks later, on April 15th, surrounded by a crowd of thousands, Mahatma Gandhi waded into the edge of the ocean. He approached an area where mud flats had been evaporating and leaving a thick layer of sediment, and there was a pile of salt where the water had evaporated. Gandhi scooped up the salt with both of his hands. That act defied a British law, a law which required that all Indians buy their salt only from the government, and they were prohibited from collecting salt themselves. So this singular act of disobedience set off a mass campaign of nonviolence, which eventually included hundreds of thousands of people, and which ultimately contributed to the political and moral downfall of the British Empire in India, and subsequently in many parts of Asia and the rest of the world. Because at that time, of course, the British Empire was the largest colonizing European empire in the world. I will say just parenthetically that Gandhi died, when he died, he weighed 90 pounds, and his total worldly wealth was estimated to be $2. And if you think about the legacy and the impact of this man, quite amazing. For the times in which we find ourselves, we are not obviously fighting for national independence, but we are fighting for the survival of our planet. I ask myself, what would my version of scooping up a handful of salt, what would that look like? And I ask, what would we collectively, as the beloved community, what would our version of collectively scooping salt look like? you are faithfully called to worship. Please join now in saying our chalice lighting words as Tom lights the chalice. The word can be found in your order of service. Please stand. Yes, thank you, Jessica. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Each week we also light 2 candles of peace representing 2 places on earth that we lift up to remember as sacred encounters with our world. There are untold numbers of places on earth that need peace. These 2 we hold especially close in this service and through the week ahead. After each candle is lit, I will invite you to respond by saying peace, soul, shalom. Our first candle is lit for the people of Haiti. We have prayed for Haiti before, and we will continue to pray for Haiti, because there are now nearly 1/2 of the entire country's population, more than 5.2 million people, are facing acute hunger. They are also struggling with cholera, high prices, and food shortages. And daily life remains in the grips of vicious gangs who are dominating through warfare, sieges, and extortion. We pray for peace, stability, and relief for the people of Haiti. To this we respond, peace, soul, shalom. Our second candle is lit for our sister cities of Haverhill and Lawrence, whose sewage systems have been overwhelmed by rains and flooding related to climate change. The overflow of these systems has resulted in contamination of waters of our rivers and now of the waters off of our beaches. Today, as we speak, there are 62 beaches in Massachusetts which are closed for similar reasons. So we pray that these cities receive the resources and the support that they need to address these problems at their roots. To this we respond, peace, soul, shalom. You're already rising, so you're risen. Let's sing Morning Has Broken, hymn number 38 in your great terminal.
So as I mentioned, we're doing everything a cappella this morning, and Chuck Kennedy has kindly, he's a longtime member of the choir, agreed to help lead us off. I don't read music. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness in the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's dear task. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. You may be seated.
Now that you are seated, please stand as you are able for our affirmation of faith, which will be followed by the doxology. The words can be found in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Chuck? Well, below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue. You may be seated.
The generosity of our community is an essential ministry that supports the work of the church, both in Newburyport and beyond. Each week, 50% of the Sunday offering not designated as a pledge goes to a local community partner engaged in important efforts to transform our region. And this month, the July shared collection will go to support Community Action, Inc. This is an organization that provides resources and opportunities for individuals, families, and communities to overcome poverty. They have lots of different programs, including adult education, care for children, food and clothing, and housing. And the organization envisions strong, thriving communities free of poverty, and their programs serve many communities in greater Newburyport. In order to give online, please use the link in the order of service, and you can also make a contribution by text, and of course you can always just mail a check to the church. Thank you. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Thank you. Each week we lift up the joys and sorrows of our beloved faith community. Tom Himmel, our pastoral care associate, will light the candles as I read what has been shared with me in advance of today's service. If you would like to share a joy or a sorrow to be read in the service, you can always send an email to us at betweenus@frsu.org or write in the book located in the vestibule. Eliza Goodall has asked that we light a candle of gratitude for the life of her brother Peter. Peter passed away on June 26th. And she also asked that we light a candle of healing and concern for the members of Peter's family who are deeply grieving his loss. Deanna D'Angelo has been waiting for a long time for a hip replacement and has encountered some setbacks. She has asked and welcomes communication and contact as she continues to wait. And finally, we light one candle of appreciation for all the parents, the grandparents, and the caretakers who have spent countless hours reading stories to their children and to their grandchildren, and to preserving these wonderful tales that survive the test of time, the sands of time, and have been passed by you all down through different generations. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this back to Jessica for a story.
My last trip before the pandemic halted all travel was to Peru. I love spending time in Latin America. As many of you know, I've been working in the region for a few decades, and there's so much I appreciate about the culture, especially now when we live here with a good deal of division and incivility in our own country. There's something about the kindness and expressions of kindness that one encounters in Latin America that can feel like a balm to one's frayed spirit. Well, on this particular trip, I was traveling with 2 board members of the small foundation where I work, and on this day we were visiting a community radio station in Iquitos, which is the capital of the Peruvian Amazon. That afternoon, the colleague who had been serving informally as our interpreter for my board members who don't speak Spanish had to return to Lima, and so it fell to me to be the interpreter, to be a kind of bridge between my American companions and the Peruvians who were hosting us. Well, while the others were touring the headquarters, I fell behind, and I found myself looking into the large one-way window of the recording studio, where a group of volunteers were recording a broadcast. They were performing a story set in the rainforest. Some of the characters were trying to cut down a large ancient tree, and others were trying to protect it, and the tree, it spoke too. And it told them about all the benefits that it provided to them, to their families, to their communities, to the whole planet. I stood there and watched. I was engrossed. But suddenly, there was an interruption. There was some momentary confusion, and then there was some laughter. I wasn't sure what was going on. I couldn't hear, I could only see. But the volunteers stopped the performance. They started all over again to re-record the whole scene so that it could be broadcast to communities all over the Peruvian Amazon region. Well, pretty soon, it was time for us to join the group so that they could tell us about their work and what it meant to them. So the 4 of us filed into the recording studio, and it was a pretty small and cramped space. The 8 volunteers were all clustered around a huge wooden table, and we 4 visitors were kind of clumped up against a wall, and up in the corner near the ceiling, there was a tiny air conditioner that was doing its valiant best, but pretty soon we were all sweating. And I could sense my American companions kind of shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Well, we began the meeting, and we went around the table, and each volunteer talked about their work, and I translated their contributions one by one. So now, if you have ever been on one side or the other of an interpreted or translated conversation, and you probably have, you know that it takes a lot of effort. You have to listen really closely. Sentence by sentence, you wait for the next point, and then you pull these together to extract the meaning of what is being said. So I continued as interpreter, the bridge between my group of companions and this group of Peruvians who were eagerly sharing their stories. And oh, they were incredible. There was an indigenous professor who is teaching his native language to young people to help keep that language alive because it's threatened with linguistic extinction. And the older couple who are educating about nutrition because they were concerned about the high rate of diabetes in their region of the Amazon. And their 20-something daughter, well, she was volunteering too. Just amazing, amazing people. Such amazing stories, I thought, as I translated each contribution. But I could also sense 1 or 2 of my companions becoming a little distracted and impatient to wind up the meeting and head back to where we were staying. It had been a long day. It had been a long week. And still, I understood, but still I felt a little irked. I mean, I thought to myself, these people have traveled through heat and dust to tell us their stories. Can't you give them your attention for a few more minutes? But of course, I didn't say anything. Well, next, it was Hilda's turn. She was trim and smartly dressed in a suit, though she had taken a long bus ride to come and join us for this meeting. She was about my age. She told us she volunteered with this particular organization that we were visiting so that she could help people who were hungry. And she told us a little bit about her earlier years. She'd had a difficult life. Not enough money for food or for clothing for her children. But things were much better now. And then she related another crucial detail. It was only recently, when she was well into her 40s, that thanks to the organization we were visiting, Hilda found the support and the confidence to do something she had never done before, something really life-changing. She had learned to read and write. Well, at that moment, the bridge I was carefully building between the two groups started to creak and break apart. As the meaning of what she was saying dawned on me, I was overcome with emotion. I could not speak. I could only cry. And not for just a few seconds, but for a really long time. I couldn't speak, but I also couldn't hide. You know, sometimes if you are moved to tears by something, you can kind of hide it, you can dab your eyes, you can look away, but when you are the interpreter between two groups of people, there is nowhere to hide. Everyone was confused. A dozen expectant faces were staring at me. It was a multicultural sea of confusion. My board members were really insistent. What is she saying? What is she saying? They kept asking. They kept on like that until they realized that I couldn't translate for them because I could not speak, because I was crying. And meanwhile, the Peruvians on the other side of the room, they were looking at me too, expectantly. Surely I wouldn't let down Hilda. Her story needed to be told, and somebody needed to translate it. There was nobody else in the room who could do that. Well, eventually, after what was apparently, by all accounts, a full minute, or maybe 2 full minutes, which is a really, really long time, I regained my composure. And I picked up the thread of the conversation, and the meeting continued. And afterwards, this being Peru, we all posed for some group photos. It was only later, when I'd had time and space to reflect and think about what had happened, that I remembered something. That interruption in the recording studio earlier, that confusion I had witnessed, it was because Hilda had stumbled over reading her lines. She had faltered, and so everybody had to start all over again and repeat the scene and re-record it. It took more time. Now in our world, that might have been a moment of embarrassment or even shame, requiring an apology. But not in that little community radio station in Iquitos on that hot afternoon. The pause, the gentle laughter. No hay problema, no problem. The others in the group, they knew her story. They were patient. Now, as I reflected on it, I understood more fully what I had witnessed earlier. I realized that it was not just Hilda's story, powerful as it was, that had propelled my very public tears. No, it was the others in the group, and it was how they responded in that moment. It was their kindness. It was their grace. And now I'd like to welcome Reverend Janet.
Well, I'm going to invite everyone to go over there, including you, Jane. Anywhere, and if you folks would mind coming closer. I'm going to offer an interactive story, so we need all of you. It kind of goes along with what you were talking about. We need each other. We need each other for so many reasons. Does that make sense? So, okay, that's the third story. Yes. Would that be okay if everybody would move? Just to be closer, and because I'm going to tell a story and you're going to be part of the story. And if you're over there or over there, it seems like we need some cohesiveness. We're all going to turn into children eventually. Can you hear me okay? I ask that because I have tinnitus, and I'm super sensitive to hearing. I miss a lot. So if you don't know what that is, it's always a ringing. Zzz. So I don't want you to miss this. Let me light my candle. I light this candle to bring us in together, to bring the energy in, and that we could feel a cohesiveness, a togetherness. It changes the energy somehow, a candle, a simple gesture like this. And it's made with fir needles, and fir needles are where I come from. I grew up in the Adirondacks. I am Reverend Janet, but I wear many hats. I'm a mother of 4 children, a grandmother of 4 children. I'm Reverend Jan and the Herbals, Reverend Janet the celebrant, the officiant. I do many ceremonies. I'm a life coach. I'm a yoga and meditation teacher from way back. And now I just finished my therapy, forest therapy, so I'm a guide for the woods. My passion. And I'm also, years ago, I went by the title of the Story Weaver. We are all just a bunch of stories, all woven together. I come from the mountains of the Adirondacks. My great-grandmother, her name was Kate, and she ran a lumber camp way back in the woods. And the name of the woods was the Conjumunk. It was outside of Speculator, New York, if anybody knows that. That was my great-grandmother. And imagine what that life would be like in the woods, back in the woods, like 15 miles, my dad said. And my grandmother, Agnes, would walk to school on a dirt road. And as the story goes, 15 miles, she went once a week. And as the story goes, a white goose followed behind her. I mean, that image, right? What is imagination? I hope that you could immediately see this little girl, Agnes, walking to school, walking to get to the one-room schoolhouse with a little white goose behind her. My great-grandmother, Kate, eventually came out of the Conjumunk and started a hotel in Speculator with a gentleman. I don't know his name. My oldest sister knows everything. She knows all the names, all the dates, all of those specifics. I only have imagination. Anyway, that attracted folks that came from the city. And I imagine Boston. I imagine New York City. They needed the fresh air. The towns, the cities were smoke-filled, so they had to get up in the fresh air to breathe again. It also attracted boxers from Philadelphia, from New York City. My grandmother, my great-grandmother would cook, clean, carry heavy things. It was always working really hard, using that back of hers. Now later, as time went by, my grandmother moved to Gloversville, married my grandfather, and they had a little boy. And that little boy was my dad, Tom. So on Saturdays, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my father, when he was 5 years old, would take a very long ride to Speculator to help my great-grandmother. My grandmother would wait on tables, and my father, Tom, would have a card deck in his pocket. And he would take that card deck and he would do little tricks. And some of the customers were really enthralled with my dad, I can only imagine. He was a charming little man. And he would be given a nickel for what he did. People appreciated that so much. Those are kind of the stories that I have. Well, my great-grandmother, Kate, broke her back. Later in her life, she came to live with my grandmother, Agnes, and my grandfather, Fred, which we called Poppy, and she was on morphine. I think that's what they gave them. I absolutely hated morphine. One day she said to my grandmother, "I'm off of it. That's the end of it." And she broke the habit of the morphine, cold turkey. To me, that represents all of it. The story represents somebody that has perseverance, bravery, courage, all of those things to pursue a life, a good life. I think it's carried into the Dunn gene now. And I have a daughter. She lives in California, and her name is Kate. We named her after my great-grandmother. And you know, she's taken on those same attributes. Hallelujah. It's been said that people who lack the connection to their roots are like trees without roots. It keeps us connected. It keeps us strong, fortified through our life story. It's just a thread that we carry. I know I carry the blood of the Dunns. I carry drive, desire to make it, and knowing that I am strong. And sometimes I forget, but somehow I come back to remembering. Maybe that's what life is all about, remembering who we really are. And it all comes from story. It helped me on my crooked path, and it helped shape me to who I am today. How did I meet Jane? Interfaith, interspiritual, one spirit seminary. I had no idea why I was there, and I tried my darndest to get out of it, but that daughter that I spoke to you about, Kate, she said, "No, Mom, you can't quit." All the way from California, and I listened, and I'm so glad I did, for hence I would never have met Jane. So many things changed in my life. All that we are is story. From the moment that we are born to the time we continue on our spirit journey, we are involved in the creation of story. It is what we arrive with. It is all we leave behind. We are not the things we accumulate. We are not the things that we deem important. We are story, all of us. What comes to matter then is the creation, the best possible story that we can create. We are who we are because of our stories. And when we can do that, when we can take time to share those stories with each other, with our grandchildren, with our children, with each other, we see each other. Just like Jessica, that story. I've never met her before. I feel like I know her now. And that's what happens. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We recognize our kinship. We change the world, one story at a time. I am not a scientist. I'm not really an academic. I'm a feeling, healing kind of person. So I might challenge you when I say this, but this is what I understand. We enter into a story through the door of inner hearing. The spoken story touches the auditory nerve, which runs across the floor of the skull into the brainstem, and that, just below that, is a thing called pons, P-O-N-S, which is a bridge. It connects the cerebrum and the cerebellum, as well as the right and the left hemisphere of the brain. So some have said that the auditory impulses are relayed to our consciousness, to the soul. Some say the auditory nerve, being divided into 3 or more pathways, are deep in the brain. The ear is meant to listen in 3 different levels. There is number 1, the mundane conversation. Some of you have been part of a mundane conversation. Pathway for learning in art. And number 3, pathway to the soul. The soul might hear guidance and gain knowledge while we are here on earth. Think about that. So here's the invitation. Listen with your soul. Listen with soul hearing, which is really the mission of the story of La Loba, the wolf woman. La Loba, the wolf woman. La Husera, the bone woman. La Trapera, the bone, the gatherer, the gatherer. This is a story that comes from women who run with the wolves. Forgive me, I don't have it completely in my mind, or maybe it is in my mind, but it may not come all the way out. But what I know of this story is that I'm sure that every one of you knows of a place, but you've never been there, someplace in your mind where La Loba may live. Like the stories of Eastern Europe, many people go there or wish to go there. They're seekers, they're gatherers, they're lonely, they're afraid, they're looking for something. In this story of La Loba, she is, or has been known to look, short, round, lots of bumps on her skin, and fat. I can almost feel myself like that. La Loba. La Loba would rather spend time by herself than with people. She makes more sounds like an animal than she does like a person. She croaks, she cackles, she crows. Many people have said they have seen her. They have seen her out in the desert, wandering. Some people say they have seen her in a car, a beat-up old car with a shotgun hole in the back window. There are other people that say they've seen her by a well somewhere outside of Tucson. And then there are other people that say they just know they saw her in Mexico, in Oaxaca. Check me if I'm wrong here. Oaxaca? Oaxaca. Oaxaca. With a bundle of sticks on her back, all bent over. Well, she lives somewhere, and her sole purpose in this world is to gather bones, particularly bones of wolves. She's in the mountains. She's in the riverbeds on her hands and knees looking for the bones. And when she has found just enough bones, she will put them in her cave and start to put them together. One by one. They could be the bones of the rattlesnake, they could be the bones of the rabbit, they could be of the bones of a deer, but particularly the bones of the wolf. And when she feels like she has that skeleton of bones pretty much together, she will take it outside. She'll rattle. She'll put her hands up, spread her fingers wide, and start to sing. She'll start a fire, put some more bones together, and sing and sing and sing. And when the bones are all together, the fire is brighter. She sings louder and louder. This skeleton begins to flesh out. The wool, the fur of the body will start to grow. The tail will start to curl. The tail will begin to move. And the eyes will open. She will bless it with her singing. And then the wolf will run down the hill. And if the light is just right, the moonlight, the sunlight, whatever, just right, it might shine on the body of this wolf. And the wolf will look over as if to smile. And suddenly, it will turn into a laughing woman. And away it will go. Now, if you are lucky enough and you are wandering, you are lost, you're just don't know where to go, you may find La Loba in your dreams, in your travels, in your pursuit on that crooked trail. And she will show you who you truly are. Just gathering us back together. And that's our journey. Our journey is really to bring ourselves back to who we really are, back to the soul. That's my belief, and that's what that story represents to me. So take your journey, use the image, or maybe you'll dream of La Loba, whatever. It's never too late. Now I'm looking at all of you and I think you've just all of a sudden turned into animals. Well, we are animals. So I'm going to ask if you would just put on your go back to your childhood. Did you like stories when you were little? Did your mother tell you stories, or your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, your teacher? I don't know. My mother, Shirley May, used to draw pictures of a little mouse, and she called it Icky Picky Boo Boo. And she would tell us stories. That may have been another reason why I'm attracted to stories. We never know. But what I'm going to ask you folks to do is the first 3 rows, I'm going to ask you to be chickens. Geese. And I look out there and it looks like there's a couple of roosters. Okay, 3 of you. All right, now, 1, 2, 3. The next 1, 2, 3, 4. Would you please be a goat? Or if you have trouble with the sound of a goat, let's just go with ba, ba. Does that sound good? Okay, now I know this is going to be kind of funny, but you people will be a cow. Cows. Okay? Does that work? Do you know what a cow sounds like? Okay, so I invite you to just relax. No pressure. We're not going to say, oh no, you're not going to make it. You can't be a rooster. All right, so this story is things could always be worse. And you know your parts. So I'm going to invite you to loosen up and just be with the story. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in a tiny, tiny little house with his wife, his children, and his mother-in-law. They would fight. The children would fight and fight and fight. The mother-in-law would complain. It was so tight, it was so uncomfortable that one day the man said, I can't take it anymore. I'm going down to the village. I'm going to find the rabbi. I'm going to ask him, can you help me? That's what he did. He journeyed down to the village, and there was the rabbi sitting in the middle of the village green and stroking his tiny little beard and rocking back and forth. And the man said to him, Rabbi, can you help me? My life is so miserable. There's always fighting. My mother-in-law's complaining. Life is so terrible. The rabbi stroked his tiny little beard, rocked back and forth, and he said, let me ask you, do you have chickens? Do you have a rooster? Do you have ducks or a goose? The man thought that was quite interesting. Why would he ever ask him that? Well, he said, yes, I do. I'll tell you what, man. You go back home. You go to the barn and take out the chickens, take out the rooster, take out the ducks, take out the goose, and put it in the house. Yeah. The man looked at him like he was crazy, but who was he to question? He was the rabbi. So he went back to the house, back to the barn. All right, this is your part now. And he pulled the chickens. He pulled the roosters and the ducks into the house, and he shut the door. Oh my gosh. He thought life was so miserable before. Now he's got it's so loud he can't even sleep. Good job. He left. He went down to the village, and there in the middle of the green, rocking back and forth, was the rabbi. And he said, Rabbi, my life is even worse. I don't know what to do. They're making such a racket. I can't even sleep. And the rabbi stroked his tiny little beard, rocked back and forth, and he said, I'll tell you what. Do you have any goats or sheep? See how my eyes are going? Oh, that's what he thought. Oh, no. Yes. I mean, who was he to question? He was the wisest man in the village. And so he went there. He went back home, he went to the barn, and he pulled out the goats, the sheep. Very good. And he put them in the house. Very good. A billy goat. Oh my goodness. Now there was more fighting. There was more arguing, more complaining, and not only that, but there was the chickens, the ducks, the rooster, the sheep, and the goats. Yes. Good face, Jane. It was crazy. He went back down to the village. He had to find the rabbi. There was the rabbi sitting in the middle of the village, and he looked at him and he said, my goodness, Rabbi, my life is even more miserable. There's fighting, there's arguing, there's complaining. Can you help me? There was all those sounds. The rabbi stroked his tiny little beard, rocked back and forth, and he said, tell me, man, do you have cows? Oh, he didn't want to tell him he did. But who was he to question? He was the wisest man in the village. And so he went back to the barn, opened up the door, ready? And he pulled out the cows. Very good. And then he opened up the door to the house and he pushed them in. All very nice. Wow. This is a real barn now. It was louder than ever before. The children were fighting. The mother-in-law, and I don't mean to put her in that category, it's just a story. She was complaining. Nobody's sleeping. But not only that, with all that racket, it smelled horrible. He couldn't take it anymore. He ran down to the village. He got to the village green, and there was the rabbi, stroking his beard and rocking back and forth, and he said, oh, Rabbi, my life is so bad now. Can you please help me? I'll tell you what, man. You go home. You go to your house. You open up the door and you take out the lovely, so lovely. Take out the goats and the sheep. And take out the cows. And that's exactly, he ran back up the hill. He got to the house. He opened up the door. He pulled all of that out, put it back in the barn together, collectively. The mother, the children, and the mother-in-law, they cleaned the house. They slept all night long. And in the morning, he was so happy. He ran down to the village. He couldn't wait to talk to the rabbi. And he said, Rabbi, my life is so amazing now. The rabbi rocked back and forth, stroked his little beard, and he said, remember this and only this. Well, maybe some more things. Life could always be worse. Thank you, you were excellent. I have one more short little story. They say in the beginning of time, it was dark. Actually, it was black. It was the end soft. Complete darkness. And then came this vessel, this huge vessel of light. But something happened, and the vessel broke. It broke into 1,000, 100,000, many pieces of light. And it went all over the world. It went into the four corners of the world. It went into people. It went into animals. It went into everything. Events. And they say that it is our job, for we are healers, to go out there and seek the light. Not only seek the light within ourselves, but within the light within all of us. Share that light. Be that light for one another. And that's the story. Let me just finish with this and I'll be out of here. So much gratitude. This is my blessing. As my father would say, and many fathers and mothers and many people, my cup runneth over. We ask that you lead us out to the water of life. Wash over me so that I may see more clearly my story, that I may listen more deeply to my story. So who I find, who I truly am, what I'm truly made of, and that I remember who I am. Amen, Ashe, Amen, and so it is. Thank you.
Please rise in body or in spirit for hymn number 159, This Is My Song.
This is my song.
It might be a little high, do you think? This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, the God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Chuck. Please remain standing and join in our saying our unison benediction as Tom extinguishes the chalice. The words can be found in your order of service. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all who are fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and on us now and always. I bless you this morning and hope that as we leave, each of us may free ourselves of old stories that we might be carrying in our heads about ourselves and who we are. old limiting stories. Let us let go of those. Let us release them as we might step out of a winter coat, a shabby winter coat, when spring has arrived, and create for ourselves new stories, true stories of who we really are, remembering, as Janet urged us to do, our true selves, that we are bold, bright, compassionate, and loving. May it be so. Go now in peace and return in great joy. Amen.
There's no challenge to extinguish.